we were just talking about this outside about working with people and the HR aspect of cybersecurity and how there's a disconnect between the technician and HR department and the hiring process, where HR will get a posting from, let's say, a cybersecurity section of an organization. And HR folks will look at that requisition and say, okay, this is what we need based on what we have on paper. And the requisition goes out as a job posting. And when the applicant comes to the organization and says, I want to apply for X position, HR only knows what's on that paper. And it's difficult for the organization and the applicant to kind of meet in the middle on this, because HR does not speak cybersecurity. They don't speak nerd, essentially. And they don't understand what that different department of their organization wants. And so my solution is if possible, if you go to apply at an organization, ask for a representative from that department that they're hiring for, whether it be help desk, networking, cybersecurity. So that way that person has a reputation within the organization itself that's hiring already, and can kind of translate between what's going on between the applicant, HR, and where they're trying to apply for. That's not always going to be the case, but it's good to at least ask and know that that's a possibility. I mean, you don't want to regret later on saying, did I try? Was it worth it? Or anything like that. And that's where a huge disconnect, especially on DoD side of the house. People come in trying for GS positions and they don't know what they don't know. And HR is so far disconnected on the DoD side, they really don't know. So always make that attempt moving forward. Like, I'd be interested to hear from y'all's experience, like, because y'all have more private sector experience than I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it's really not HR's fault. They're there as the gatekeepers, and they're there to filter out the noise, right? Which makes it easier on the department who's hiring, because then, they get all the chaff weeded out, and then they get the more qualified applicants so that they can start going through that. But when it comes to working with people, I mean, it doesn't matter what field you're in. People are people, and you just got to figure out a way to deal with people that you're not so comfortable with, or you don't really maybe care for. Maybe they're not your cup of tea. And so you just kind of, use your skills to communicate. Because really, a lot of the problems with people that I've come across is simply because of miscommunication. So the more you communicate, the better off you're going to be.
I think in addition to that, it all hinges on how often you have discussions that bring about the concepts that are really important to the organization. You think of things such as cybersecurity awareness training, for example. How many organizations out there skip that because they somehow feel it's something that is not of such a level of significance, and thereby downplay it in a way? And so many things go wrong simply because there wasn't any cybersecurity awareness training done. And certain things that may also come up may actually lean on having a use case policy in your organization. If you've got devices, what is permissible within that organization for employees and everybody else who is handling that infrastructure to actually use. And you can avoid quite a lot by simply having that use case policy set up so that everybody, when they're onboarded, they can read through that and know that, okay, this is out of bounds, I can use this for that, and I'm not allowed to use this for that. Without anything written, it's very difficult for somebody to actually see.
Yeah, and that's why policies are so important. I mean, they lay the foundation for everything else to be built on, and without good policies and the communication of those policies with the employees, then it's a crumbling foundation.
All right. I just wanted to say people are perception driven. Yes. And because of watching movies and how other people portray cybersecurity, people go out there thinking that their everyday life is going to be based on what they watch on a particular movie. So with that perception, it can also work negatively, whereby people get intimidated to actually get started simply because what they saw is intimidating, or it can actually lead them to having higher expectations. So they may come in an environment, they begin playing around with things that may not even be part of their job description, because that was the anticipation that they had. Say, I'll be going around testing this and testing that. And that may actually lead to a lot of issues. Bob?
Well, I was going to say, it's not just with cybersecurity, but as an example, it's pretty deep, right? Yeah. And I guess what I'm really trying to get at is when you go to the swimming pool, maybe public pool, there's the deep end of the pool, and it's pretty deep, right? But there's also the shallow end. And if you don't know how to swim when you're young, you start in the shallow end. You start with learning how to just do simple things like a dog paddle or something, just stay afloat, really. And that's so that you can then later on move to the deep end of the pool. And that's the way it is. It seems like there's a lot. It might be overwhelming, but you just got to start somewhere. Pick an entry level certification, some things you want to learn about, and you start there. And then also do your research on the web. Find mentors. There's lots of people out there willing to mentor, and you just got to get started. That's really the thing, because you can always sit back and say that there's just too much. That's just too complicated. But in reality, if you want to go in that direction, you just need to start walking.
You just hit on it, entry level. I've been from East Texas originally, and there's not a lot of IT infrastructure where I'm from originally. So a lot of people are intimidated to even attempt to go into the field. And I've been pushing for the past couple of years to make IT, at least in my area, regional area, more of a trade skill, like trade school. Folks that go to trade schools to learn welding, you're not going to become a master welder overnight. It takes 3 to 6 months at your average trade school. And that's perfectly fine, because when you leave there, you know the basics of welding. To go and learn on the job training from that experience, from that mentorship, to go further up. And let's say you want to become a rig welder or an underwater welder. That mentorship that you have when you come out of trade school is going to point you in the right direction. Same thing is in IT, especially in cybersecurity. You do not have to go and get a terminal degree. You do not have to go get every certification under the sun. Start easy. You have to know the basics to have a solid foundation, Security Plus. Just start there, and then while you're doing your Security Plus track, you may see or learn about a field that you knew very little about or didn't even know at all. Say, you know what, I want to get into network analysis. And then while you're learning your basics, you run across people along the way that have a little experience or maybe even a lot of experience in that area. And you start learning from them, getting that mentorship and learning that you can get by and be very successful in IT all around without having to spend thousands of dollars.
Right.
Because go ahead.
Oh, sure. Just on the flip side of that, one thing I also realize is that it is more of a lifestyle. It is not something that you do to just, get a paper or just move on. This has to be something that is embedded in you. It's part of your life. You're growing with it, and you just continue to progress. And you don't really have to look too far sometimes. I've seen people in Microsoft domain of doing things, and they may simply concentrate on security solutions that are actually backed within Microsoft solutions, your Microsoft 365, your Azure, and you progress in that track. And with that, it gives you the ability to begin understanding and building skills that you can then transfer. Maybe if you'd like to go into networking, or maybe you want to go into a different path, such as compliance, and you begin looking at what you already have. It shouldn't really be something that is always external, that should actually get you going. You can begin looking at the basic foundational blocks that are available, and then you build on that. Like you mentioned, Security Plus is really a great way to start. But let's say I am maybe a support administrator of some sort, and I do have access to Microsoft 365. You can begin looking at compliance sections. You can begin looking at policies within that section. And by so doing, you begin familiarizing yourself and understanding where those things can apply, such that when you get into a role that requires you maybe to do some advanced network security concepts, then you can begin building on top of that. So it has to be a lifestyle practice. It has to be part of what you do on a daily basis, as opposed to something that you would do and discard and maybe try to do something else.
Sure. Yeah. And the thing too, we mentioned Security Plus is entry level. Well, that's not the only one, right? We've got several other organizations and certifications companies like ISC Squared. They've got the Certified in Cybersecurity. Oh, yeah. And Cisco even has the newer CCST cybersecurity exam, which are also entry level. So there's lots of options is what I'm getting at for your entry level. So just kind of figure out what you're comfortable with. Take a look at the exam objectives, kind of get an idea of where you want to go. And of course, early on, it's as entry level, you're not going to know I'm going exactly here, but you just kind of, as you look at the information provided by these vendors, then you can kind of figure out what works for you. I got it right now. Yeah, the number one misconception is I'm just not smart enough. Oh, please. Trust me, I ain't no genius here. It's not really that hard. And if you think of your journey into cybersecurity as stepping stones, you start with one, you gain some knowledge, and you take that and you go to the next level and the next level, the next level, and you just build on your knowledge. And over time, well, then, yeah, you can be the master of all, but you got to start out somewhere. And so the idea here is that anybody can do this. It's really not that difficult.
The other misconception is that people think by obtaining a single certification, they'll wake up tomorrow and get a cybersecurity role, which is really very different. You might actually find yourself having to do some work to find a job even after a Security Plus. Yeah. The biggest thing that you can actually have are real skills that you can point to say, look, I've got my Security Plus, but in addition to that, here is maybe a GitHub repository, or here is something that I've accomplished. Here's my lab at home, and this is what I've built. Such things really are impactful, as opposed to just having expectations of, I've got this cert, I'm going to go ahead and get a role and things like that.
Yeah, so basically you build your own little portfolio.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Y'all both hit the really big ones that are out there. And this last year, I've been diving deeper into digital forensics. And I've heard it from a couple learners already that say, oh, I can't do that. Well, why not? Because we can't make mistakes. That's not true. You can make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. And we need to make those mistakes to learn what does not work. So that way we can learn what does work. The biggest thing in our field is we have to log everything. So that way, if we do make a mistake, we can just go back a step. It's already in our log, so we know that this worked, this worked, this worked. And if we're doing something on the legal side of the house, we can actually go back and have that chain of custody or chain of evidence log to where we can still prove everything. In the digital forensics world, make all the mistakes you want. Make multiple copies of that forensics image. You can mess one up all day long. That way you know what not to do, and then move on to the next one, try something different. And then once you get your practice down, as long as it's logged correctly and can be repeated in under witness, you're good. You don't have to explain all the mistakes that you made. It's the success as long as you document it and can prove that success. Mm-hmm. Right. Practice makes perfect.
There you go. Yeah, never try to, on a core switch, which is basically the centralized device of a large environment that everything flows through. Well, there's a feature called spanning, where you take a copy of everything going through there and you spit it out one of the ports so you can do like packet captures. Yeah, I would not recommend doing that on a core switch. You tend to take the network down. Yeah, that was a learning experience.
I have something similar to that. We were on a secure network, and we were doing a red team exercise for DoD, and I had recorded through TCP replay about 4 hours of regular Nipper unclassified traffic, and we had created a honey net on the secret side, and we were replaying that traffic to throw off the red team that was there. It wasn't a honey net. It was live production, high side network, and the red team was getting a little bit nervous because they saw traffic going to Google that didn't exist and all these other networks, and they thought there was a crossover between secret and unclass.
Somebody plugged something in, so it shouldn't have been. Yeah,
there wasn't. Yeah. It was just all this replay traffic. Now, good news for us, it took the red team forever to figure this out. Bad news. It made it look like there was networks that didn't exist.
Well, there's some basic ones out there, really common mistakes that people make sometimes, such as running an upgrade before you actually have your ISO saved or any of that backup that is really critical to that environment. Just be careful. Every time somebody shouts to say, we're going to be upgrading that device, don't just, of course, you might have everything that is required to do that, but always ensure that you've got a backup of whatever is going to actually be needed on that device before you do any upgrades. Yeah. And when it comes to printers as well, I've seen sometimes, especially when there's no collaboration between the network engineers and the guys who are taking care of printers, when they run an update on a printer that is on a network, the next thing is you'd realize people might have challenges actually printing that device, and you'd need to make sure that you communicate. And if there wasn't any maybe preparation prior to that configuration or upgrade, you'd realize you might have to take a lot of time setting that printer back to its initial stage before you can actually have everything smoothly running. So running your upgrades without making sure that you've got a backup can be futile.
I'm glad you said that. That reminds me of one more, and you know where I'm coming from on this. Always assume, kids, that there's never any backup power. And if there is a backup power, assume it always fails. Double check.
Along those lines is always look for something else. And that being said, because a lot of times you there's something you want to accomplish and you need a tool to do so. And so maybe your organization uses a specific tool and they're out of licenses, whatever it might be, or it costs a whole lot of money. It's something you would like to get. Well, believe it or not, there are actually vendors who make all kinds of things. So you might find a tool, maybe you want to do a wireless site survey or something, and the tool you see, oh, that's $3,000. They're never going to do this. I can't, justify this purchase. But if you do some research, you're going to find out there's lots of open source stuff out there that you could use as well. And that is, as open source, it's going to be free.
Sure.
Yeah, but you want to vet the organization that provides that to make sure it's safe and secure. Just don't trust everything out there.
There is a great fear among tech people, net people, to say they might just want to jump onto something simply because it's been mentioned. Bob mentioned something new. I'd like to look it up and learn it. It's really not possible in the time frame that you've got in a day to learn everything that pops up. So you might find it very difficult for you to actually progress because you're everywhere and trying to do everything. It's important for you to select the areas that are relevant and are really going to be impactful in what you learn. And it's also not possible for you to work throughout. You've got to make sure that you manage your time in such a way that you give your body time to recharge and reboot before you can actually go to the next task. So it's possible that you could actually be focused on something and eventually you feel burnt out, you feel less motivated to actually progress and do that. Get some rest. There's nothing wrong with that. And then recharge your body and come back and see how much progress you'll be able to do. So
yeah. I would say take care of yourself. I mean, it's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
We can work 20 hours a day and run ourselves into the ground, but that's just not productive. You need to take some time for yourself and your health. And then also, I lost my train of thought.
I'll say, don't be afraid to walk the floor. In cybersecurity, we're going to end up working in a cubicle or in a kind of isolated environment to where we're focused on IDS, IPS systems. Make time during the week to go out and check on the users. A lot of these users out there, they don't know what they don't know. And if something's not working because, let's say, a network policy that was put into place, they don't know how to report that. They just know that it doesn't work quite right. And if we make time to go see the user, we're getting away from the screen. We're being able to actually go out and move and take a little breather from the systems that we're working on and talk to the users and see if what we're doing is actually working out for them.
Correct. That's very true. It also just refreshes the mind. And other than that, do not be afraid to ask. I've had burnout simply because I was trying to go round and round, trying to solve something that somebody next to me already knows. Mm-hmm. So do not be ashamed to ask. Ask what you don't know. It might feel intimidating sometimes, or people might perceive you differently, but that will save you a lot of time. And like Bob says, your health is really your wealth. It's very important for you to remain having that good health in order for you to continue learning and excelling at what you do. And if you don't take care of that, it can just turn against you.
Mm-hmm. Sure enough. And something else that might bite you in the rear is wanting to take on too many responsibilities. Really focus on what you're doing and do it at your best, and then you can kind of start to grow from there. And one other side note is multitasking. That's really become more of a thing of the past, and it's been scientifically proven that when you try to do a bunch of different things all at once, that you get nothing done. So just take it one day at a time, one step at a time, and focus on what you're doing. Maybe from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. you're going to do this, and then at that point you're finished that, and you're going to change and work on something else. But really, time management comes into play, and just really try to focus on one thing at a time.
Did you say time management? Time management?
Time management.
Meaning, should I start with my phone on and be able to, respond to that message while I'm studying and things like that? I think it's very important, like he says, that we really take care of how we manage our time. And I actually do this whenever I have to concentrate. I would maybe put my phone on mute and put it aside, or maybe put it on flight mode. But you can concentrate in those 2 hours as opposed to having it and trying to concentrate. That really doesn't do your brain much justice. It's important that you really just zone into what you need to learn, do it, and then later on come to all these gadgets that surround us today and see what you need to keep up with.
You said the multitasking, how we found out here recently that's bad. I will tell you, digital forensics, multitasking, bad. Don't multitask during an investigation, one task at a time. The moment you start logging in your chain of evidence log that you've been doing more than one thing at a time, whoever opposition attorney is and opposition investigator is, they're going to bounce on it. Because, he was distracted and Erik wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing during that time. He, instead of taking the digital forensics image, he was writing in evidence. Was he writing in the right evidence? Who knows? One thing at a time. Take your time.